We know he wasn't really running the country.
Knowing what you know now, do you wish like you had a third term? You know what, if I could make an arrangement where I had a stand-in, a front man or front woman, and they had an earpiece in, and I was just in my basement in my sweats looking through the stuff, and then I could sort of deliver the lines, but somebody else was doing all the talking and ceremony, I'd be fine with that.
We used to think he was actually running the country, and now they're like, no, he didn't even see those executive orders. That was all auto-penned.
It's the art of deflection coming from former President Obama, as well as his friends who are still in Congress today, and Senator Warner and Congressman Jim Himes, really all basically saying that exact same statement, which doesn't actually address the issue that was revealed in great detail in the over 100 documents that we released last week, in the documents that we will be releasing later this week, that point to the undeniable fact that you laid out in your introduction to this segment, is that the intelligence community had one assessment, that Russia did not have the intent or capability to try to impact the outcome of the U.S. election leading up to.
Barack Obama's carefully shaped legacy has faced renewed scrutiny as figures like Joe Rogan and Tulsi Gabbard have offered bold, unfiltered critiques. With sharp commentary and a fearless approach, they've challenged the widely accepted narrative, pointing out inconsistencies and highlighting deeper issues that often go unnoticed. Their analysis cuts through the polished image to ask difficult but necessary questions about leadership, accountability, and public perception. It's a direct, thought-provoking perspective, one that invites viewers to re-examine the myth versus the reality, and consider what may have been overlooked for years.
No. He gets a glass of Flint tap water, and I swear to God, he drinks it like this. Blushes.
Can I get some water? I really did need a glass of water. This is not a stunt.
Usually when something isn't a stunt, you have to say
it's
that.
It's 100% a stunt. When was the last time a president stopped a speech to ask, can I get a glass of water? They would never do that. They would have water ready.
When Barack Obama entered office, Wall Street welcomed him with applause, and by the time he left, many believed the financial elite had grown even more comfortable. The man who once positioned himself as a reformer and opponent of corruption seemed, to some observers, to shift into a role more aligned with powerful interests. With policies that often benefited large donors and major institutions, critics like Joe Rogan took notice. He didn't need deep investigation to ask a simple, striking question: how did a grassroots community organizer rise to become a trusted figure among the wealthiest donor class in just 8 years? It's a question that continues to spark debate over Obama's economic legacy.
Of what they campaigned on, they don't practice at all. Great example is the Obama administration. The Hope and Change website had to be changed because there was a bunch of stuff in there about whistleblowers.
No, I don't think Mr. Snowden was a patriot. I called for a thorough review of our surveillance operations before Mr. Snowden made these leaks. My preference would have been for a lawful, orderly examination of these laws.
Protecting whistleblowers, which they didn't do at all. There was one of the worst administrations for whistleblowers.
I first joined the Democratic Party over 20 years ago. I was 21 years old, and what I saw back then was a party that still stood for free speech. That was a big open tent party that welcomed people with different ideas, different backgrounds, different religions, that stood up for civil liberties, that fought for everyday Americans. It was a party of the little guy. Fast forward to where we are today, that party is completely unrecognizable.
Tulsi Gabbard also entered the conversation with sharp precision, critically examining the hope and change narrative that surrounded Barack Obama's presidency. She raised serious questions about the contrast between Obama's public image and certain policies during his time in office, particularly regarding drone operations, whistleblower treatment, and the handling of press freedom. Critics have pointed out that despite advocating transparency, the administration often appeared evasive when confronted with tough inquiries. Tulsi's analysis challenged the sincerity of those transparency claims, highlighting what she viewed as a disconnect between the message and the reality. Her commentary invites a deeper discussion on whether openness was ever a genuine priority, or just part of the carefully crafted image.
I left the Democratic Party because it is led by an elitist cabal of woke warmongers. They are driven by an insatiable greed for power, and they are willing to do whatever they deem is necessary, even the destruction of our freedom, to get what they want and to stay in power. This is the challenge and the threat.
Barack Obama's presidency often blended powerful imagery with serious global decisions. From iconic photo ops to carefully choreographed public appearances, his media presence was polished and deliberate. At the same time, his administration faced growing criticism over the use of drone strikes in foreign policy operations that, while technologically advanced, often raised ethical and humanitarian concerns. Tragic incidents involving civilian casualties, including weddings and funerals, brought international attention to the unintended consequences of remote warfare. In many of these cases, official statements offered limited clarity, leaving the public with more questions than answers. The contrast between image and impact remains a point of deep reflection for critics and supporters alike.
Tulsi Gabbard explained what most Americans are thinking.
Vast majority of the Democrat elite in Washington, in politics and the media, still can't figure out why President Trump has the support that he has, and that no matter what they're throwing at him, it continues to grow, which just is a reflection of how completely out of touch they are with the people. They continue, as they did in 2016, they continue to see the American people as stupid.
Joe Rogan didn't hold back in his critique, expressing frustration at what he saw as a disconnect between Barack Obama's promises and his actions. While Obama cultivated a modern, media-savvy image, critics like Rogan pointed out that this sometimes seemed to overshadow deeper accountability, especially when it came to foreign policy. Obama campaigned on diplomacy, hope, and ending wars, yet oversaw extended military operations and controversial drone campaigns that fueled skepticism abroad. For many, the gap between his inspirational rhetoric and the lasting realities in regions like the Middle East became difficult to ignore, raising important questions about leadership, legacy, and the true cost of policy decisions.
S people age the hardest. I think Obama was probably like a very idealistic young man
Oh, Lord, what's going on now? Who's hollering? I can't even see it.
who really wanted to change the world. And that dude aged more than anybody.
I mean, I'm getting old, so I can't hear that well. I can't see that good.
Who aged the least? Trump. Trump just
This is something that
he just brushed that shit off his shoulders like it was nothing.
Chelsea, ever the realist, watched with growing concern as the man who once stood for peace became increasingly entangled in global conflicts. In Libya, intervention left behind instability and opened the door to renewed human trafficking. In Syria, U.S. support for rebel groups turned into a gamble, with many weapons reportedly ending up in unintended hands. And in Iraq, while Obama announced an end to the war, enough troops remained to set the stage for the rise of ISIS. Meanwhile, at home, his signature healthcare policy sparked intense debate. Critics like Joe Rogan argue that while the Affordable Care Act was presented as a breakthrough solution, many Americans still struggled with complex systems, rising costs, and limited coverage. Tulsi Gabbard, observing the praise around Obama's legacy. Questioned how such a celebrated plan left so many navigating red tape just to access basic care. It was marketed as sleek and transformative, but for many, the reality didn't live up to the promise.
There is irrefutable evidence that detail how President Obama and his national security team directed the creation of an intelligence community assessment that they knew was false. They knew it would promote this contrived narrative that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help President Trump win, selling it to the American people as though
perhaps the greatest contradiction critics point to in Barack Obama's legacy lies in his approach to race and justice. As the first black president, he had the platform to lead a bold national conversation on systemic reform. Yet when moments of crisis arrived like Ferguson and Baltimore, many felt he responded with eloquent speeches and symbolic gestures rather than sweeping action. While his words inspired, critics like Joe Rogan argue that tangible reforms to address deep-rooted policing issues never fully materialized. On the issue of whistleblowers, Obama's administration faced significant criticism as well. Figures like Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning were treated harshly, sparking debate over civil liberties and government transparency. Tulsi Gabbard, among others, voiced concern over how an administration that campaigned on exposing corruption seemed to deepen secrecy instead. For them, the gap between rhetoric and reality raised serious questions about how much meaningful change was truly delivered.
Gave that speech when he gave a speech on television, and everybody was like, this. And then they were, it kind of just went away.
It was one of the most beautiful moments in modern American history. People really actually stood up and stopped a war from happening.
Even Joe Rogan couldn't help but find irony in some of Barack Obama's contradictions. While the former president often spoke eloquently about progress and unity, his administration oversaw a massive expansion of government surveillance, concerns about privacy and civil liberties. Under Obama, the NSA's reach grew significantly, prompting critics to question how much oversight and transparency truly existed. Meanwhile, on the economic front, many pointed to how large financial institutions thrived under policies that included bailouts and behind-the-scenes deals. Critics argue that working-class Americans saw far less benefit. Though Obama promoted the idea of rising above partisanship, the political atmosphere during his presidency became increasingly polarized. Disagreement with prevailing narratives often led to quick labels, discouraging open debate. Rogan and others have pointed out that the promise of unity sometimes felt conditional welcoming, but only within a narrow band of ideological agreement.
Said he was a jackass.
The young lady seems like a perfectly nice person. She's getting her award. What's he doing up there? He's a jack.
It's like, oh really? Well, you.
It was about the Taylor Swift thing.
No, all this stuff.
That guy's a jack. It wasn't even that harsh of an incident. And he said it privately, and I think somebody heard it. I don't think he said it to be public.
I'm assuming all this stuff. Where's the pool?
The relationship between Barack Obama and much of the mainstream media was, to critics, more admiration than accountability. His time in office was marked by glowing coverage, frequent talk show appearances, and soft interviews that often focused more on his image than his policies. While serious national and international issues demanded attention, headlines sometimes revolved around his fashion choices or speech delivery. Tulsi Gabbard wasn't convinced by the presentation. She saw beyond the polished optics, the speeches, and the carefully timed pauses. To her, it felt like political theater, visually compelling, but lacking in substantive action. She and others questioned whether the focus was on leading the country or managing a legacy. Those who raised concerns were often dismissed as lacking nuance or being overly critical, but Tulsi pointed to real contradictions. Military interventions carried out during a Nobel Peace Prize-winning presidency, and financial bailouts that seemed at odds with pro-working class rhetoric. Her message was simple: style should never replace accountability.
Power who care more about themselves and their power than they do about the people, this country, our constitution, our democracy. They are setting this incredibly dangerous precedent that now, much like many banana republics in the world, whoever's in power has the ability to politicize and weaponize that power to go after their political opponent. Take away whatever people think about Trump or whatever.
Right.
The consequences and implications of what is actually happening and what so many of the Democrat elite are justifying in the name of protecting democracy is actually destroyed.
Barack Obama, with his Nobel Peace Prize and wide network of influential supporters, still commands admiration for his calm delivery and eloquent speeches. But critics like Joe Rogan have challenged that polished image, arguing that behind the charm was a leadership style often defined by caution and inaction. Even after leaving office, Obama remained in the spotlight not as a quiet statesman, but as a continued voice in the political conversation. Tulsi Gabbard, among others, questioned his recurring presence during moments of Democratic Party turmoil, suggesting that while he offered broad reflections, he rarely acknowledged his own role in shaping the conditions that followed. The same leader who presided over growing polarization now speaks on unity from a position of distance and privilege. For his critics, the contrast between message and legacy remains a central issue, one that continues to spark debate about substance, responsibility, and the long-term effects of presidential leadership.
Be talking about is they caught President Obama absolutely cold. Tulsi Gabbard. Barack Hussein Obama, have you heard of him? And except for the fact that he gets shielded by the press for his entire life, that's the one they... Look, he's guilty. It's not a question, I like to say, let's give it time. It's there. He's guilty. This was treason. This was every word you can think.
Joe Rogan couldn't help but laugh at the irony. While Barack Obama often spoke passionately about climate change and income inequality, critics point to his post-presidency lifestyle, marked by multi-million-dollar estates and appearances, as a sharp contrast to his public messaging. To many, it seemed less like leadership and more like commentary, narrating crises from a distance rather than stepping in to solve them. As the media continues to reflect on his presidency with admiration, skeptics argue that what remains is a carefully crafted image built on eloquent speeches, cinematic moments, and tightly managed messaging. Real, structural change, they contend, was promised and promoted, but never fully delivered. It felt symbolic, aspirational, even branded, but ultimately absent when it mattered most. Now, as Obama occasionally re-emerges in public life, his calm tone and familiar presence stand in stark contrast to the unresolved problems many say he helped shape. For critics like Rogan and Tulsi Gabbard, the issue isn't just about what he said, it's about what he left undone.
On stage, and he roasted Trump.
Donald Trump is here tonight.
And one of the lines he said to Trump, he said, "I'm one thing that you'll never be, which is the president of the United States."
Donald Trump has been saying that he will run for president as a Republican, which is surprising since I just assumed he was running as a joke.
And you could see Trump in his head going, okay, I'm going to run now. That one moment where Obama was talking shit to him might be the reason why Trump was like, I'll show you.
One of the most talked about moments in political pop culture came when Barack Obama publicly roasted Donald Trump at a White House Correspondents' Dinner. With lines like, "I'm one thing you'll never be president of the United States," Obama delivered a sharp jab that, in hindsight, may have sparked more than laughter. Some suggest that moment lit a fire under Trump, setting him on a path to the presidency. But beyond the applause and polished delivery, critics argue that Obama's legacy reveals a deeper truth, not about hope fulfilled, but about how hope can be packaged, marketed, and ultimately commodified. Just when it seems his political presence is fading, another speech surfaces, another memoir hits the shelves, and another production carries his name. For critics like Joe Rogan and Tulsi Gabbard, the issue isn't his eloquence, it's the lack of accountability behind it. They argue that while many Americans still admire the image, others are left grappling with the unmet promises. What truly changed, they claim, was how smoothly the status quo learned to smile for the cameras. And now, as documentaries and public appearances continue, some are still asking, where's the hope that was promised, and who's benefiting from its memory?